So I think I will start. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody from wherever you are on this global meetup to discuss progress, SDGs in action. And this one focuses on SDG 16, which relates to peace, justice, and strong institutions. So welcome once again. And as you know, these sessions are being organized in the margins of the United Nations High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. So we're really pleased to have you here today. My name is Jennifer Sarbury Bradford. I work at UNODC, the UN's Office on Drugs and Crime. We are the guardians of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. But with us today, we have lots of different counterparts and colleagues. And first, let me thank our colleagues from UNITAR and UNDESA for their efforts to organize these valuable sessions each year. They're very interesting. And I know that some of you are repeat attendants, so welcome once again. So SDG 16 calls for action to establish a foundation of peace, justice, and strong institutions. And of course, all of these are essential for development and its sustainability. But we can also recognize that strong institutions, and indeed achieving the Agenda 2030 as a whole, will not be possible if corruption is allowed to persist. So to respond to the challenges that corruption poses, well, this requires efforts that combine prevention, so preventive measures, as well as different enforcement approaches. And this session is devoted to precisely this. And it's my pleasure to outline what the next hour will showcase and be about. So we'll start with presenting a tool that UNODC has developed to identify and ultimately manage corruption risks through a collaborative process. We all agree that corruption undermines the accountability, transparency, and effectiveness of institutions. And while most public officials, we hope, perform their duties with integrity, all public institutions as such face the risk of corruption, be it initiated by the staff working there or by the general public looking to access public services. So the challenges lie in identifying these risks, understanding their severity, and taking steps to mitigate, at a minimum, the most pressing ones. So during the session, you'll learn more about how this process works. You will be hearing from my dear colleague Daniela Sota Valdivia about this. And we're also pleased to have with us Mr. John Mugendi, who's the Senior Assistant Director of the Kenya Wildlife Service, who will be sharing his insights and experiences on the application of the corruption risk management process and methodology. You will also have the opportunity to use some technology to go through the process yourself, providing a sort of hands-on understanding of its benefits. For the next presentation, we'll stay in Kenya. And there, my colleague, Ms. Charity Kagwe, who is a Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice Officer in the UNODC Regional Office for Eastern Africa, will provide further details of how the program for legal empowerment and aid delivery in Kenya is supporting the achievement of SDG 16. This is a program that seeks to reinforce the rule of law, improve access to justice, increase efficiency and accountability in the justice system, and the use of technology as an enabler of justice. Finally, the importance of collecting data to track our progress towards achieving our SDGs is critical. This also provides the evidence base for all impactful policymaking, which would, of course, rely on data. And it has been said that those who are invisible in data are invisible in policies. And without gathering relevant data, it will be almost impossible to have a clear picture of any progress made in achieving these goals, but also the successful implementation of the policies in question. Here, we have the great pleasure of having our colleague, Ms. Mariana Neves, who is a governance statistics specialist from the UNDP Global Policy Center for Governance. And she will provide insights into collecting data related to SDG 16 and tracking how we are progressing. So before I give the floor to my colleagues who are here with us, I'd like to remind us all of something that Einstein once said: in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And I think we have to remember that, right? Because I always say that corruption and fighting corruption and trying to sustain the rule of law is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And, you know, the corrupt individuals or organizations are always miles ahead. So we have to keep up the good fight. And, you know, there are many opportunities for all of us, countries, persons, citizens, organization, to prevent and to foster positive change. So together we can turn this challenge of corruption into an opportunity for profound and lasting change, which will allow future generations to enjoy this magnificent world that we live in. So with those words, I would like to hand over to Daniela. Daniela, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. To start learning, because this is a learning session, I would like to invite all of you to go to Mentimeter. You can find the details in the screen. You can just use your phone to scan the QR code, or if you're on your computer, you can just type menti.com and then enter the code 93111021. So I will give you a couple of minutes so all of you can join. And because this is the first section of the first section of this presentation, then we will have John sharing with us the experience of Kenya Wildlife Service, and then we will come back to Menti. This first section is going to be only for the more theoretical part, and later on we will use it to go through the process together. So, and at all times you will see the code and how to join at the very at the beginning of your screen. So you can enter Menti at any time now, because right now we will not be using it for any games, but we will later on. So then I would like all of you to join.
Daniela, I put it into the chat also, so everybody can access it from there.
Perfect. So then it will be there. So right now I will get going with a bit of theory of what is corruption risk management. So why do we use corruption risk management, or why do we foster the implementation of these processes? It is because if we think about the public sector, we realize that most public servants perform their duties honestly. So they are good public servants, but the main challenge is that many government institutions are at risk of corruption because maybe some processes are not working, or some procedures are not in line, or there's missing some training for the people working in the institutions. So the real issue is in finding these gaps that open an opportunity for corruption to happen. So in this workshop, we will guide you through this process. And the first thing is to say, as Jennifer was mentioning, UNODC, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, is the guardian of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. And this convention, in its Article 9, calls for all its state parties to implement effective and efficient systems of risk management and internal control. It does it in the framework of public financing, but we have understood that the management of this risk, of the corruption risk, is needed for all the public sector. And is in this framework that UNODC is providing technical assistance to the countries. So the first thing that we have to make clear is what is corruption risk? And why is it different to corruption? Corruption risk, it is a weakness, as I said, the window for opportunity that is in a public institution that is open for corruption to happen. It does not mean that an act of corruption has already occurred, or has to already be occurred, or has already occurred to be a corruption risk, but a corruption risk is just the window for opportunity that is there. We say that it always exists. No institution is flawless. We all, even the United Nations, we have our own windows of opportunity for corruption to happen, and that happens in developing countries. It doesn't matter which side of the world we're talking about, but this risk for corruption to happen is always there. And why is it important to address it? It's because addressing this risk will lead, or will very likely lead to increase the efficiency of the institutions and how are they doing their work. And the corruption risk management, of course, it is a process in which we will identify the corruption risk, we analyze them, we evaluate them, and then those working in the institutions are the ones that will draft mitigation strategies for these risks according to the resources they have available. And these mitigation strategies will be limited by the political will that exists within that institution. This is because although there might be some risks, some reports from journalists and citizens that corruption is happening in a certain process in an organization, it does not mean that the corruption risk management process will address that risk. The process will address that risk only if there's the political will to address it. If the people working in the institution do not want to address it, we will not impose on them to address this one. Because although it might be in the paper, on paper, but it doesn't mean that then it's going to be implemented. So what we want to have is mitigation strategies that are implemented because those working in the organization want to do so. It is an anti-corruption tool, so it's part of the big portfolio of anti-corruption tools we have, and something to take into account that this is not a linear process, but a cyclical process. And this process, you can see it now on the screen. I want to make reference that it's a cyclical process because the ultimate aim of the process is to become part of the general processes in each public institution. It means that it should not happen once every 4 years, but rather ideally it will happen every year, and it will be revised and it will be updated, and it will just not be a paper that exists so the public institutions can say that they have undertaken a corruption risk management process, but rather that it has become part of their processes. And this is how in the long term we aim to, or the process really aims to strengthen these public institutions. And with this, I would like to give the floor to our dear friend, John Mugendi from the Kenya Wildlife Service. So you can learn from their experience how it has been to implement this process in their own institution. And later on, we will move to Mentimeter again so that you can practice how to put this process in practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. Wonderful presentation to set the tone to this presentation. John Mugendi is my name from Kenya Wildlife Service, and good afternoon from Nairobi. You can see my presentation, Daniela?
Not yet.
Okay.
Maybe you can try one more time.
Let me try. There we go. You can see my presentation now?
Yes, it's there.
Wonderful. Again, good afternoon from Nairobi. It's a pleasure to join you for this event. My name is John Mugendi, and I'm here this afternoon to present to you on the impact of the corruption risk assessment to Kenya Wildlife Service, which is what Daniela has very well set the tone. Greetings from my Director General, who is aware of my presence here, and we're looking forward for a wonderful opportunity with the time I've been provided. My presentation will cover 4 key areas. For those who may not know about KWS, we'll take you through that. We'll also look at the corruption risk assessment model, which we've adopted. We'll look at the impact of that model, and we'll conclude from there. It's a rich presentation, and I know with the time I have, I'll see how much I can cover, and we're looking forward. Just a brief about KWS, well known as Kenya Wildlife Service. We are a state corporation whose mandate is to conserve and manage Kenya's flora and fauna. We cover 8% of this wonderful country of Kenya, and therefore, as an organization, we've divided ourselves to 8 conservation regions from northern, eastern, Tsavo, coast, southern, mountain, central rift, and western. All these areas are managed by conservation directors who work under the direction of the Director General. A bit of statistics, which will be very useful to understand this model, is that we manage 4 marine parks, 6 national sanctuaries, 6 marine reserves, 23 terrestrial national parks, 28 national reserves, 160 conservancies, and that goes on to build up to 20% of the county's land mass, which is under protected area system. In addition to that, we have 154 stations across the country. Now, in terms of our staff base, ladies and gentlemen, we have 4,588 staff, 3,000 or so who are uniformed, like we can see, and 1,256 who are non-uniformed professionals like me. Recently, we've added 1,500 rangers who are going to complement our security across the country.
John, sorry, just 1 second before you continue. Can you please put it on presentation mode? They are asking for that on the, so they can better see the photos, amazing photos you have.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks
Thank you
for that. Wonderful, wonderful. Excellent. We are in the Southern Conservation Area, and Nairobi National Park is one of the parks in the city, and you can see one of our endangered species, that is the rhino. And so we are proud to be associated as one of the few parks in the city. We also enjoy tourism activities from our marine parks, bird watching, game drives. We also have other activities which involve mountain climbing, camping, cycling, which is a wide range of activities which we have here in Nairobi. In addition to that, we want to also inform you that we also face risks in wildlife. That is loss of habitat, loss because of population growth, infrastructure development. Our population is growing at a very high rate. We now headed towards 50 million. Human-wildlife conflict, which is a very key area which we are handling. Insecurity, reduced wildlife prey, especially for carnivorous. Ignorance and misconception, especially to our species, that is hyena and owls. We also face diseases, climate change, bushmeat, and illicit wildlife trophies. And I just wanted us to appreciate some of those challenges that we do face, or risks. One of them is climate change. We have wildfires sometimes in our parks. Droughts, we face extreme weather conditions of drought, floods, illegal logging, which is also an area that we face a challenge on, and bushmeat, especially the mixing of genuine meat and bushmeat, which is also a deception plan from those who are willing to do this illegal business. We also carry out animal translocations to ensure that we can manage our biodiversity and also take care of them, especially when there are injuries, especially when we interact with the criminals out there. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, we have a strategic plan. And that strategic plan has 3 key pillars, which are very useful for our discussion this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. It touches on 3 key things: conservation, which is our core mandate; collaboration, which we've done well with our core partners; and enterprise, to take care of this wonderful jewel that we do have. And so one such partner that we've partnered with is the UNODC, in addition to the rest, that is the Ethics and Anti-Corruption and the Government of Kenya, whom we work very closely on this issue of corruption prevention.
Dear
Ladies and gentlemen,
sorry to interrupt you once more, because we are still seeing the slide of the Nairobi National Park, and I'm sure you are you still there?
No. Oh,
yes.
Now you're on which slide?
On Nairobi National Park one.
Oh, on my end it's moving?
Yes. No, it's not moving.
Ah, okay.
Maybe you can try to project it once more. Sorry.
Right. Let me try to reshare. Apologies for that.
now it's working perfectly. Thank you, John.
Wonderful. Very well. Sorry for that. Maybe now that you are there at Nairobi National Park, allow me just to flash you through our tourism facilities and the risks that we highlighted that we went through. I was saying climate change is something that has affected us. Apologies to take you back. Drought, floods, illegal logging, bushmeat, which are areas that we're facing, animal translocation and welfare of our animals, and our strategic plan, which, like I was mentioning, has 3 key pillars which we're working on. And I was here mentioning to you that one such organization we've partnered with is the UNODC as far as corruption prevention is concerned. We also work with the ethics and anti-corruption and asset recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, we started working with the UNODC in 2015. We almost a decade old in this relationship under a project called Preventing Corruption Within the Wildlife Authorities. And just like Daniela took you through, we've adopted a risk-based model. And that risk-based model is meant to ensure that all risks that are corruption related with a high risk or potential of affecting our organization are identified. Daniela has very well taken us through the model, so I'll not go through it, but that model enabled us to come up with our top risks, and that's one of the impacts of this model. We were able to identify our risks as an organization which have a reputation of affecting our finances, our reputation, and our mandate. And just to highlight some of them: shortcuts in procurement, misuse of confidential funds, falsification of documents, lack of equity in budget allocations, false allowance claims are some of the top risks that were affecting us. And we were able to highlight this risk to our senior management and board and concentrate on this risk, and we will see the impact of that. And we did this across board to the 8 conservation regions that I was able to take you through. Now, in doing that, the Director General set up a corruption prevention committee, which I'm privileged to chair, across the conservation regions. This team has been trained and equipped by the UN and the EACC to ensure they are now integrity officers. And they regularly meet to discuss anti-corruption initiatives. And the team has trained and sensitized all staff on issues to do with corruption prevention. Ladies and gentlemen, the team has also been integrated in key committees, and I want to tell you that we've just recruited 1,500 rangers. And with the structures we've laid in corruption prevention, we were able not to have any issue with the recruitment, which is an area that we can tell you that we carried out with the highest level of integrity, and that's why this team is very key. Again, strategic support and sensitization is very key. We have a full board of trustees, and we've trained our board, senior management, and corruption prevention committee on integrity, because the tone at the top there has to be right. Last financial year, we were able to also mentor our staff on integrity. What is their perception on integrity through this model? Because we realize engagement of our staff is very important. This is part of our board of trustees who are trained by the UN and EACC on issues of integrity. One very important document that we've anchored our processes around here is a corruption prevention policy. And I'm happy to report that the UN assisted us develop a corruption prevention policy which assigns specific responsibilities in preventing, detecting, and reporting corruption. And we are currently working on our whistleblowing policy, which is also an area we working with the UNODC. Again, the conduct of our staff, because we want our staff to be able to conduct themselves in an integrity way. And what we've done is that we've developed a code of conduct in the partnership we've had with the UNODC, and all our employees, ladies and gentlemen, have signed a copy to say that they've understood what that policy is all about. And that has helped us a lot to ensure that we conduct our business in an ethical way here. A couple of years ago, in partnership with the UNODC also, we carried out a corruption perception and experience survey, because once we identified our risk, we wanted also to find out what staff and other stakeholders perceive as far as corruption is concerned. And one key area I wanted to bring to your attention is reporting of corruption. We realize that corruption is sometimes reported because staff feared victimization, there was no protection, and no action was taken. And so to improve the environment, you'll be surprised that even as much as we want to take advantage of technology, staff still wanted to drop their issues on our integrity boxes. So we had to revamp our integrity boxes. We also have revamped our website to ensure that you can phone us, you can come in person to our offices to report corruption. And during our recruitment processes, we had individuals who are coming to report incidences of that. You can also report your corruption via email, and we'll see how that works. Again, we've integrated our intranet to ensure that staff are aware of what we do. We've leveraged on technology to ensure that our policies reporting is also integrated within our intranet. One interesting system, ladies and gentlemen, that we are working on is our integrity management system. We realize that corruption reporting is very key, and through the corruption risk assessment that we've done is that we want to ensure that corruption is reported. And so in partnership with the UNODC, we have developed an integrity management system where staff can report either anonymously or through disclosure. And when they report, we have a mechanism to ensure that as soon as they report until the issue is managed, and then they are communicated, which provides a very transparent way of ensuring that corruption is reported and managed. One of the things also we've done is to sensitize our staff, the 4,588 I mentioned about on the issue of corruption. We do this online, physically, and we've developed a thematic process to ensure that each and every staff, because when we carry out our corruption risk assessment, staff tell us they may not understand what all these are about because they are very much geographically distributed. And so we have thematic way of sensitizing our staff, either in our jumbo parks, these are our elephant parks, or our national parks, because we have zero tolerance on corruption here at Kenya Wildlife Service. Now, through this model, the corruption risk assessment, we realize that we cannot fight corruption alone. And that's why our strategic plan mentions about collaborations. We have a multi-agency which is spearheaded by the UNODC to bring various sectors in wildlife, fisheries, forestry, and marine to be able to take care of our natural resources. And this interagency ensures that we take care of any gaps as far as wildlife crime and corruption is concerned. Through the EACC, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, we've also declared our wealth, and these wealth reports are with the commission to ensure that we know how much you're worth, so that in case we have any lifestyles that have changed, we're able to go back to our reports. When you come to our airports, we've ensured that the issue of wildlife crime, collusion at the airport, because that's a very key area, we've ensured that we can be able to ensure there is no collusion through continuous training on our officers at the port. And this is an area that we've invested very heavily to ensure that we are able to assess any products that come in through our ports. And we work very closely with the various agencies to ensure that. Yesterday, we were marking the African Anti-Corruption Day, and this to us is special because we want to join Africa and the world to tell them that we have zero tolerance on issues of corruption. And yesterday, we were marking that day as we joined the rest of Africa. And some of these initiatives continue to ensure that we strengthen our case of zero tolerance on corruption. What has been the impact of some of these tools? Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a journey. When we started this in 2019, because that's when now we started to see the fruits of our works, we scored 49.4% as far as corruption prevention is concerned, because it's a determinant in the government. We graduated that to 88%, to 100%, and last year, 93%. All this is because of the partnership we've had with the UNODC and the cycle we've done on corruption risk assessment, knowing our risk, preventing them on time, and ensuring that we are able to protect our natural resources. You'll be interested to note that we've had a reduction in our poaching. In fact, poaching is no longer our threat here in the country because of this model, and we continue to ensure that we protect these rare species and gems so that we can be able to contribute to the country's GDP. As I conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you that Kenya, and in particular Kenya Wildlife Service, is committed to manage the wildlife sectors as a wild heritage, despite the many dynamic, like we've seen, risks and other emerging challenges. And I know together we can be able to manage this. I'd also want to take this opportunity to thank, of course, the government who've been very supportive on this particular area, and UNODC on their technical advisory and support financially to be able to manage this very important area. I'm saying this because our revenues and our expenditure, if we were to do this alone, you could be sure our priorities will not be on this particular area. But by touching governance, we have been able to see our revenues go up. And in fact, this year we saw growth in our revenues despite what has been happening politically in the country. And all of that goes to tell you that together we can be able to ensure that we make a difference. And just like Jennifer mentioned when she was starting her opening remarks, partnerships, togetherness is very key on this very important area of corruption prevention. And as an organization, we've seen value to that for the 10 years almost 10 years we've been working on this model. And more importantly, every year we've continued to update our corruption risks, and we're telling you that this is a model that has worked for us, and that's why we've been open and vulnerable, because we know what corruption can do to such a very important institution like Kenya Wildlife Service. So I would want to thank you for your time. I know there's quite a lot that we would have wished to cover, but for the time I had, we want to say thank you. And we, as Kenya Wildlife Service, we look forward to partnering with you on this particular area. Thank you very much, and I want to take it back to Daniela.
Thank you so much, John. It was such an interesting presentation. I hope participants have also learned a bit more. And now I would invite all of you to go back to Mentimeter. Are all of you there? Yes. So the first thing is we will try out Mentimeter. I don't know how many of you are have used Mentimeter before. At least I can see one person is there. So if more people could join, that would be great, so we can have a more dynamic session. So this one is just to try, and that you become acquaintance with the features Mentimeter has. It's very interactive. We cannot see your names, only if you have put your name as your username, but otherwise it's anonymous. And this is because we want to encourage all of you to participate, to take part. Just choose what you think is correct or not. No one will judge you. It's about learning, and learning is also about making mistakes. So with this in mind, maybe we can start, and we will start with a little quiz around corruption risk management. So if you're ready, for the players that are there, we have 13 people. You can join at any time. So let's go with the first question. If you answer faster, you get more points. And the first question is, what is a corruption risk? Is it a weakness in a system? Is it an act that has already occurred? Is it a crime? Please choose the answer you think is correct. Perfect. It's a weakness in a system. Most of you got it right. So ready for question 2. Do corruption risks always exist? Do they exist in every organization? Choose yes or no in your device. Perfect. Most of you got it right. Corruption risks are always there in every organization. And this is how it looks so far. Most of you are tied, but now it's because of who is faster. And so far, Cake is the fastest. So congratulations to Cake. But now let's continue with our little quiz. And the next question is, how many steps does the corruption risk management process has? Does it have 3, 4, 5, or 6? Most of you got it right. It has 5 steps. And don't worry, because we will go through them in the next minutes if you got the answer wrong. Next question is the corruption risk management a linear process? And this one is really linked to the other one. So the other one was a bit tricky because it has 5 steps. But is it linear or not? Most of you got it right. Yes, it is not a linear process, because although we follow the 5 steps, we also want it to be cyclical, because we want to have monitoring and evaluation. We want to have communication lines and reporting lines as well. So it is more a cyclical process than a linear process. And the last question, is there only one corruption risk management methodology? And this is even a bit trickier because we have not yet talked about it. Very good. You knew there's not only one CRM methodology, and the one we will go through today, it's the one that UNODC is using. That doesn't mean that it's the only one, but it's the one we have been using to support institutions like Kenya Wildlife Service. Oh, we have one more question. Which board defines the corruption risk management process best? Is it an external assessment or is it a self-assessment? Very good. It is a self-assessment. We want the organizations to go through the process themselves. Maybe some institutions like the anti-corruption in every country or UNODC or any other UN agency can be part of the process if the organization decides that that's how they want to do it. But we mainly would be there as facilitators. At least UNODC would play the role of facilitator. The anti-corruption agency can also play it. It's going to vary from country to country, but it's important to have in mind that this process should be a self-assessment. And with this, I think we can see who the winner is of our little quiz and who was fastest, because most of you got most answers right. So Agent X9 is our winner. Congratulations to this agent. And with this, we will now start. All of you will go through the process with me. So step 1 of the corruption risk management process is to establish the context. We saw with John's presentation, it was perfect. He explained to us what at the beginning. What information did he gave us about Kenya Wildlife Service? And this is what we do when we establish the context. So now I want you to try between the 3 options you have there. I think you can choose more than one option in Mentimeter. I'm not sure. What do you think establish the context should entail for an organization that it's then decided that it has decided to undergo a corruption risk management process. Very good. Yes. So in establishing the context, what the organization has to do is, as most of you have chosen, is to determine the organization's mandate and its limitation. With John's example, he told us what Kenya Wildlife Service does, what's their mandate, which are the regions where they operate. And to have this knowledge is very important for those who are going to undergo, for the working group that you will have in the institution to lead the corruption risk management process. And not only that, but they should also have information on which are the internal controls, external factors, have all the information that is necessary to start the process. Why not investigate past acts of corruption? It's because although you can use some information of previous reports of acts of corruption, part of this step, it's not that you go and undergo internal investigations of what has happened. We are not aiming, this process is preventive. So we're trying to prevent corruption, and we want to generate a culture within the organizations that talking about corruption risks is okay. It sounds difficult, and in many settings, it is very difficult to talk about corruption risks, but this is what this process is trying to do. And that's why in UNODC, we do not really foster any type of link of the corruption risk management process with investigations, because there are other channels within the institutions that are in charge or should be in charge of undergoing the investigations and leading that process. But step one, you need to know what your organization does, where are the limits of the mandate you have, how do you relate to internal and external actors, factors. And with that, you go to the working group that is leading the process would go to a second step, that is the risk identification. And here, of course, let's imagine that all of us work in a wildlife authority, so we can go through the process together, but this applies to any entity. It could be a hospital that decides to go the corruption risk management process, it could be a minister, it could be any organization. So we can identify then the risk that you want us to use during this session. And the winner now is nepotism governs hiring processes. Okay, so we have also officials accept bribes to issue hunting license. But okay, we will go with the risk of nepotism governing hiring processes. And with this risk, with nepotism in hiring processes, so in the second step, you would have identified the risks. You did a brainstorming session within your organization. You identified the nepotism in hiring processes to be a corruption risk that you want to address. But then we have to analyze these risks. We will analyze all of them in real life in the workshops we have. And then public officials will have to decide, okay, if this corruption risk would take place, would it impact my mandate, the reputation of my organization, or does it affect the organization financially? And all of this, you might think, oh, when you go to the process with the public authorities, how does is there like a formula that you use? And no, we don't have any formula. What we use is the knowledge, and we make sure, and this is why it's so important, that when the organizations form the group of experts that will be leading the corruption risk management process, that every department is represented, that there are not only senior officials, because that doesn't really allow for everyone to freely talk, but we want some senior officials, some like medium rank officials, some or maybe new officials, and those that have a lot of experience, so a mix of officials. So there's a more comprehensive view of how the organization operates and which might be the risks that the corruption risk present in the organization. So in this case, most of you have said that if the risk would occur, then the impact would be more on the reputation. And why is this important? Because when we go to the next step, that is the evaluation, we have to think, okay, if the risk would materialize, how high would this impact be? How high would this reputational impact be? Would it be high? Would it be medium? Would it be low? And here you can choose also on your phone if you think it would be high. All of us imagining we work for a public institution. And most of you have said that the impact would be high. And then we will mix all of this information to the risk evaluation. And the second part, once we have analyzed, okay, how high would the risk be? And the second one is how likely it is for this risk to occur. Then you can say, oh, it might be medium, might be high. And this is what the public officials do again during the workshops. They have to think about this. And why is it important to go through this? Because then we will match this information of how likely the risk is to happen and how high the impact would be if the risk would materialize, so that we can prioritize the risks. Because as you can imagine, in most institutions, when there's a risk identification, a corruption risk identification, the list might be very, very long. It can be up to 20, 30 risks, depending on every institution, every organization. And why do we analyze the risk and evaluate them? Because we're looking for those risks that are more likely to happen. And if they would happen, they would be they would have more impact or affect more the organization. And that's why then we would link all this information to then decide which risks are prioritized. Very good. So most of you have said that the probability of the risk happening is medium and the impact would be medium. So this would be a medium risk. And usually we would focus on those that have been identified by the working group as having a high probability of having it happening and a high likelihood. I don't know if you saw John's presentation when he shared the risks they had identified. For example, you could see a red color on the right side of the Excel. And that's why you could see that all these risks had been identified at highly likelihood, highly probable to happen. And if they would happen, they would have a high impact. And that's how there are also, and this is what we do in the second phase, we would maybe then in the next year analyze those risks that were identified as having a medium probability and a medium impact, because then maybe they have moved to be highly likely or more likely to happen or not. And that's how we generate the cycle of analyzing all these risks and trying, of course, at the end to address all of them. And with this, we go to the last step of the process, in which really has 3 steps. Because so far we have identified the corruption risks. Now we have the corruption risk that is most pressing. But really, to develop the mitigation strategies, we do not focus on the risk as such, but we focus on the causes of the risk. What is really causing the risk? And then once we have identified the cause, we would analyze the controls. And according to that, we will develop the mitigation strategy. By we, I mean the public officials within the organization. And this, I was thinking more about the risk for this step. I was thinking more about the risk of there is only the option in the national parks to pay with cash. So what do you think would be, this is the risk that tourists are only paying with cash. What do you think could be the cause? And by SOP, I mean standard operating procedures. Very good. And most of you would say, okay, maybe the cause is that there is no standard operating procedure for card payment. And let's say this is the cause you identified. There could be several causes, but the important is that if you identify several causes, for each cause, you develop a mitigation strategy, because this is really what needs to be addressed. And you have chosen, but maybe also the reason is that public officials are not committed to the work they are doing. So what do we do now? Then we have identified that maybe there are no standard operating procedures to pay by card. So here in this image you have, what we would do with the organizations is we would say, okay, do controls exist? Yes or no? In our case, we are saying that there are no standard operating procedures. But really, the control, it's there kind of because there's a way to pay. So there's a procedure to pay with cash only. So then we would say, yes, there is a procedure. That is how to make the payment for the entrance fees. Yes, but is that control adequate? Is it adequate? Not really, because you have identified that there's a risk because the tourists cannot pay with card. So then your mitigation strategy would be linked to maybe creating standard operating procedures that allow for card payments or not. And why is it so important to analyze if controls exist or not? Maybe in this case, it's very straightforward. They are no operating procedures. Then your mitigation strategy would be, okay, develop operating procedures that allow for card payments. But in other situations, it is a bit more complicated. And sometimes because you have only a limited group of officials undergoing the process, it might be difficult for them to know about all the rules, all the regulations, all the procedures within the institution they work for. And that's why at this stage, it is so important to analyze, okay, is a regulation already exists or not, rather than straight going to developing something new. Maybe there is already something in the institution that only needs to be improved in some regard. Maybe needs to move from paper-based to be virtual, or to be able to use mobile money to do the payments and others. So this is why it's so important that this step of control analysis, just not to go for always to developing something new, but rather also analyzing if something needs to be changed or improved. And also here comes to the fact that if we analyze, maybe the issue is not linked to the standard operating procedures existing or not, but rather, as some of you mentioned, maybe it's linked to the fact that there's no motivation within the organization, that there's no training, there are no incentives and others. And also this analysis takes you to that. If you go to the last part, maybe everything, you have a perfect procedure, everything is technical, everything is online, is virtual, is working with the latest technology. But then we get to the point where maybe it's not about the process, but it's about the people. And this control analysis also allows you to get there, to understanding if it's the lack of motivation, maybe, is it the lack of understanding of the procedure, is maybe people are not tech savvy, so they don't know how to use the tools that you have provided. And with that, I want to pick your brain a bit. Maybe I'm running a bit out of time, but here is where the mitigation strategies would come, linked to this analysis that we have done, which could be the mitigation strategy we would use. And of course, the part I was talking about, maybe the real cause of it not being the process, but rather the people. And this could also be part of the risk treatment. Or maybe you need both. You need a risk mitigation a strategy that is linked to developing the SOPs or to a procedure, but also you might also need it to be aligned with a mitigation strategy that is linked to the people, and maybe to develop further training or to develop more incentives or to reduce the workload of the officials. And with this, we've gone through a very fast corruption risk management process with you. Of course, this is just for learning purposes. Reality is always a bit more complex. And that's why entities like UNODC go there as facilitators to try to help the entities undergo this process. And we're happy to, later on in the Q&A session, to listen to you and your questions. And if you have any comments, we're happy to receive them, or any other thing that we might help you with. And of course, following Jennifer's example, I cannot go without giving you a quote. because many comments we received about the corruption risk management, sometimes, of course, we know when we are talking about fighting corruption, a lot of pessimism might be around it. But with the corruption risk management, something that we have learned is that even if it's a small step, it is a small step in the right direction. And that's why I really like the quote of Martin Luther King Jr., because he said, if you can fly, then run. If you can run, then walk. If you can walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. And this applies to all of you that really want, all of us that really want to make a difference and really want to fight corruption for all our future generations. And with that, I give the floor to my colleague, Charity, who will now take you through another experience in Kenya.
Can you hear me? Thank you. I'm Charity Kagwe. I work at UNODC here in Kenya. And what I will take you through today is a project that's a little bit novel. I think it's the largest project south of the Sahara that looks across the justice sector. And maybe like my colleagues, I will start with a quote, which has been requoted by one of our fastest runners, coming from Kenya, who says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And as you saw, even when from the presentation of the wildlife corruption risk, when they looked at their corruption risks, there's a need not to work just alone, but to work together. So I'll share a short, just tell me if you can see my presentation, just 1 minute. A very short presentation of this particular project. Minutes. Let me know if you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Please
So
put yourself in presenter mode though.
I don't even know how to do that, Jennifer. How?
At the bottom of the screen, you should have a little, it looks like a little screen.
Yes, to
Yeah.
the right. Where you
Go
were,
further
to the right.
Oops.
To the right. Okay.
No,
No, that is not what I was planning to do. To the right here.
No, that one. Yeah. No. You were just there.
There.
No, go to the left of the percentages. Left.
I'm
Left.
not helping. This one.
Yes.
This one, right?
Try that. Otherwise, we can see all your notes. There you go. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll go. Let me go back to page 1. So PLEAD is a program that is called the Program for Legal Empowerment and Aid Delivery in Kenya. It's a program that started in 2017 and ended, the first PLEAD program ended in 2023. And it looked at work we can do under SDG 16. That is work to prevent corruption, to look at the UN standard of minimum rules of non-custodial measures. Also with that, in that aspect, you look at issues that relate to corruption within prisons, and also the UN standard minimum rules on administration of juvenile justice. The first outcome was enhancing legal aid and assistance. This was delivered by UNDP through CUCs, or COC, what are they called? Sorry, CSOs, through the CSOs, and there was a lot of CSO engagement. Outcome 2, 3, and 4 were delivered through UNODC, where we looked at strengthening court administration and case management, increasing quality and efficiency in the criminal justice system, improving coherence, cooperation, and collaboration within Kenya's justice system. Well, all these outcomes look like they are standalone, they each speak to each other. And in this, we were going to be working with UNDP when they look at non-government institutions, but we were going to look at specific institutions. That was going to be the judiciary, the prosecution, the police came under the National Council of Administration of Justice. There was also the probation and aftercare. And there was also, again, the prisons that fell under probation and aftercare. No, sorry, under the National Administration of Justice. It's a council on justice. And then there was also going to be the Department of Children within Kenya. A lot of our work under Plead 1 was on strategic planning and change management. As we said earlier, there is no point of going to speak to any organization if there's no proper buy-in from leadership and understanding also from the people who work in that institution. And I think Mr. Mugendi gave a very good example. Once the leadership is on board, then it's going to be very easy to work with them on issues that have to do with corruption. So our work was really on developing strategic plans, which we did for several of the institutions. And in the development of these strategic plans, we looked at issues that also had to do with corruption, such as a code of conduct, and also kind of following up with the work that is being done, more transparency with the work that is being done. We also worked on capacity building. You find, and I think our other colleagues said, when people are not trained enough, they're not able to do their work well enough. And we really concentrated on building the capacity of the justice sector across the board. And that included just helping them find tools that they, especially tools that are within, that adhere to the international standards, tools that were going to help them in their learning and in their delivery of services. When it came to issues of bail and bond, what were the rights? How would we have a consistent strategy across the field? As you well know, when it comes to issues of bail and bond, if it's not properly done, that's also a risk that there is on issues of corruption. So we sat with them, and these were also based on their strategic plan, looked at a learning model across the board, across so that they each understood each other's mode of working, and there was more communications across each of the institutions. That is where we had coordination and cooperation within our own justice sector, but also with development partners. And I believe what happened during this time, it was a very crucial moment for Kenya. It was between two elections, highly contested. It was also it also took place when the pandemic broke out. But what we saw through the coordination and cooperation of each of the justice sectors actors through the National Council of Administration of Justice is they were able to face issues together, issues that were facing the country together. So when it came, for example, to issues such as what to do during the coronavirus, how are we going to respond in a way that justice was still delivered, and it was still delivered in a timely manner. They developed they developed SOPs across the board in which they knew that they could now use digital and virtual courts. And that was one of the things that we actually worked with them to, was that we were able to work with a very flexible donor at that time, who allowed us to change our work plan to respond to what was needed at the time. So we had links between the prison, between the police station, the children's, where the children were being kept, and the courts and the prosecutor's office. And we were able to keep the justice workers safe, as well as also work with them to keep the people who are seeking justice safe. What you find is that once you see this kind of development, when the justice sector is more transparent, more speedy in giving out justice, then the social contract that the people have in them remains intact. And maybe I can mention a little bit of what is happening now within the country. I think everybody knows the things that are happening inside the country right now, but you will see that there is still confidence within, especially the judiciary. And that is something that we really say has been a lot of, we don't take, of course, credit, but we've worked together with them on very many issues when it comes to dealing and handling issues that come up. And they have also taken the lead in trying to deal with issues such as police brutality, and mentioning, not being fearful about being able to come forward. Another agency that we worked with was Witness Protection Agency. I believe in East Africa, we are the only ones who have a Witness Protection Agency. You see, well, one of the problems, especially in corruption cases, is that people are afraid to come and give evidence. Mr. Mugendi said it very well. Your life is at risk once you come out. But with supporting the Witness Protection Agency, we were able to give confidence to Kenyans that there is possibility to come forward, give your evidence in secret, have it heard, and you can go back to your life. We have also, not through this program, but through other programs, supported the whistleblowers bill. It is yet to go past the parliament, but we believe with the role that with what is happening. Jennifer earlier said that with a problem, I don't know if I'm quoting you right, Jennifer, but with a problem also comes an opportunity. So this looks like a very good opportunity for the whistleblower bill to come forward, because there's needs for these kind of cases to come up. And so I can see Mr. Mugendi is agreeing, because we need protection, and this is actually the really right time. It is a little bit, it has been said, I think, by quite a number of people that goal 16, which is the anchor goal for the SDGs, seems to be one of the goals that is really lagging behind. But I believe in a sense that if you look beyond the crisis and the problems that are happening, and I'll just talk a little bit about Kenya, where we have this problem, you can see the way in which people have made progress, the way in which people can gather. While we have had extrajudiciary killing, people have still been able to demonstrate, and the demonstrations are going on, and they're being able to have that discussion that relates to a democracy. So it might look bad, but perhaps this kind of painful discussion needs to take place so that the changes happen. But looking at the way the judiciary is acting, the way that the prosecution is acting, there were some charges that they could have charged people who are demonstrating. They did not charge them. The way in which once you go to court, the people are being released. We see that there is hope when you look at that in a holistic manner. So maybe going back to plead, I would say that one of the key areas that we worked on was the strengthening of the National Council of Administration of Justice. This had been an institution which was really in paper for a long time, and it functioned under the judiciary, in the judiciary's offices. But together with them, we were able to move out and form a different organization, and have the rest of the justice sector start a trust system that this is not an arm of the judiciary. This is one that represents all of them. Right now, there are several task forces corruption, how to deal with corruption. And this is going across the board. How are we going to deal with the issues, these painful issues on corruption? Not a blame game, but what are we going to be able to do now when we want to work on corruption? Another key area that came up was and has been a real pain for the common person is paying of bribes on the side of the road, and how it's almost impossible to get past, to live a month in Nairobi without being asked to pay a bribe for different reasons. However, we are looking at supporting the government, and even now where the discussions are taking place, we're looking at supporting the government to come up with something that has happened in other countries, where you can have an instant fine, where it's more of an administrative process and not a criminal process. It's still a work that is an ongoing work, as we said, one step forward, sometimes two steps backwards, but it's something that we hope will continue growing, and one that will really bring a lot of hope to Kenyans, because the face of corruption really is the face of a policeman asking you for money on the road. As I said, during the pandemic response, because of the joint action amongst all the justice sector actors, were able to reduce the prison population. Unfortunately, this did not last as much as we would have hoped, and there are many factors that increase prison population, including poverty and petty crime and other things that are beyond the control of the justice sector. But you could see that there's a lot of work that's going into reducing prison population across the board, and also making bail affordable to people who come to court. We also worked with the justice sector on active case management. it's said that that justice delayed is justice denied, and active case management is a tool that works where they have a pre-trial the case had and finished. And so they don't have to ask for many adjournments, which has been the problem of justice in a sense, because by the time you come and your case has been adjourned several times, you either might lose your job or you just give up. And so you find that people then begin to lose hope and faith in the system. But now there is much more work around this active case management. There is a bigger uptake amongst the judges and amongst the prosecutors. We know that it makes their work easier. They're able to begin and end, but also it helps the people who are working actually want to come to court to do their work and then leave. Another big win, and I think it happened in several countries, was e-justice, which had been so much, let's say, it was very hard to convince the justice sector to take on e-justice. And some of them, given the age of some of the judges, it was too novel. But once COVID came, we used that opportunity, and we supported the judiciary in really pushing online justice. And I'm glad to say it is still happening today. It's amazing to see that people only are requested to go to court when you have a hearing and when the judge is going to be available. Every mention is supposed to be online. And that is a big win when it comes to delivery of justice and people actually being able to trust the system. There is no point of going all the way to court and you find it's been adjourned. But through this, you actually get a notification and you don't have to go to court if it's just a mention. Even your lawyer can represent you. So we found this a big win when it came to the faith in the justice system. So yes, we talked about also e-learning and innovation, where we tried to work together with several institutions such as the police in developing e-learning modules. Some of the things we tried to work, especially during the COVID time, was the SGBV work. There was a lot that was happening on that ground. We also looked at the diversion, that not everybody. If you remember the COVID rule, sometimes it's criminalized not having a mask or something like that. But, not everybody needs to go to the prison cell, but there could be the use of diversion. And a lot of innovative things came during that time, which continue to be wins that are being used now. Again, as a justice system, once you become more agile, you get more faith from the community and more, can we say, more trust that the social contract is being kept and that they can trust that their rights will be upheld. In Plead 2, we are going to, knowing, of course, the issues that are happening across the board in the continent and in other areas, anti-corruption is one of our very key interventions. Some of the work that we'll be doing, we have discussed with Jennifer. We'll be looking at a good survey to help us collect data on how gender impacts, how corruption impacts gender. That should be starting soon. We are also partnering with the EACC, who are our very good, strong partners when it comes to building capacity. I must say that this corruption risk that was done with the wildlife was also conducted for the judiciary, and they were able to make some changes, also being conducted for the probation and aftercare. And we're hoping that all the justice sector institutions will agree for such a risk assessment to be taken, and they'll be able to use that as one of their markers, because right now they have to have a marker as what they have done to deal with corruption. So we've just dealt with the probation and aftercare. The report is about to come out. The prisons are also interested in looking at their systems, and we'll be thinking about other offices and hoping to build on that so that there can be much more transparency and, looking at where the gaps and the weaknesses in the organizations are. I know Mr. Mugendi would say that right now in most of the parks, you cannot pay you don't pay by cash. It is only paid by through M-Pesa or the money from the telephone, which nearly all the Kenyans have, and also I think most of the tourists who come. So it's actually looking at where the weaknesses can be and how you can reduce the interaction of men with money, and even what they call them cartels around systems, where there's less need for the hand of a man to deal with issues of systems. So so when we increase efficiency and accountability through technology, there's a lot more transparency. Recently, I must say, and just quoting again what is happening now, a very important judgment was being held with regard to whether the army should come out onto the streets or not. And the judge who was in court had over, I think it must have been over 1,000 people listening to him on Twitter across the board. So it's open. It's clearly an open hearing for people to see what is happening to them and what's going on. And I think it forces transparency when the judge knows that this is going to be seen across the board. You're accountable to so many people over the X spaces. They were there in many places. It was quite obvious that he had a big he had a big audience, and he had a lot to do with when it comes to integrity in a time of tension as there has been now. So our 4 main outcomes under plead the enhanced capacity of criminal justice systems to fight corruption, and that would be also when it comes to issues of investigation, prosecution, and also when it comes to crime prevention and education. I think it's always we've always said it's better to it's better to prevent instead of to look for a cure. And in issues such as corruption, a cure sometimes is a very bitter pill. So we hope to work on more prevention strategies so that we don't have to take the bitter pill of the cure for corruption, which would of course include in many times incarceration of some key people. We also continue to work on the strengthened administration of justice through improved coordination. One of the things we hope to achieve is continue to push non-custodial sentences, especially when it comes to petty offenders, because in places like this, and questions have been asked why people who have stolen so little are in it's just about criminalizing poverty in a sense, because the other person might be able to pay a bail, and one might not be able to pay the bill. But now we are looking at alternative justice systems, diversion, especially when it comes to children. Diversion is the first thing. You're not supposed to enter the criminal justice process. And petty offenders are supposed to be given a bail and bond that they themselves can be able to afford. And that's one of the things that we hope will continue to be taken up. Let's just say it's not taken up as much as we would like to, because again, it has to do with the discretion of the judge who is hearing the case. And also when it comes to these matters, also the prosecution who decides to charge, the prosecutor who decides to charge, because we did work where it came, that it is the prosecutor who decides whether to charge or not, not the police, which had happened before. But now the prosecutor has to then make his discretion and say, I will move forward. But with the technical capacity building that we're giving prosecutors across the board, we hope that they will see more good decisions coming from them, where they refuse to charge, like during Corona, where they refuse to charge people for not having a mask, and they let them out and tell them, get masks, and if you come here the third time, this time it will be serious. But they were able to really decongest prison cells during that time. We also look at the enhanced capacity of the select criminal justice institutions that we're working with. Right now, we'll be working very closely with EACC, the prisons, the National Council of Administration of Justice, the Judiciary, Prosecution, and Department of Children. Again, Witness Protection Agency continues to be a big focus for us. We hope that by the end of this program, which is supposed to be ending in 2027, that not only would these things have been taken up, but they will now be owned by the government, and the government will assign work. So as you can see, outcome one is mainly looking at EACC and National Academic Training and enhanced capacity of investigative and prosecution authorities. Outcome two is looking at strengthening, cooperation, and what we more uptake by the judiciary, ODPP, police, PACS, KPS, DCS, of all the things that have been done, and that they will then be able to put money into the programs that have been set. And I must mention what we have dealt with and what we have called the green justice, where part of the work we have done is to make justice always available by having solar power backup. And that has worked in so many of the places that we put solar, because even when you want to have your virtual courts, when the power goes off, they are still able to continue with court. Mercy of whether there are floods or whether there's issues with with electricity, but you're able to have the delivery of justice despite lack of electricity and using natural energy. I should wrap up. I think I've taken a lot of your time, but we hope to do a lot more with the tool that has been discussed when it comes to some of our other institutions, discussing with EACC as well, and looking at how they have. I know that Jennifer and the rest of the team have worked with the EACC, so they've looked at the tool that you have developed, and they're able to use it when it comes to looking at different institutions. So moving forward, we will look at being able to have this kind of discussion more between us and the institutions, and how they can be able to have more uptake of this kind of self-interrogative tool to stop gaps that will lead to corruption. So that should be the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Charity. And now, we've heard this throughout, and I really wanted to make this point because Mariana is about to present on something that is very close to my heart, which is the collection of data. And we've heard it throughout where we speak about policies and so on. Data collection is really at the heart of it, knowing what it is you're trying to address, knowing the reality. Mariana, please, you have the floor. Are you ready?
I am ready. Thank you so much. And your patience, just 1 second, so I can share my screen and you can see my presentation. And yes, here it is. And I have to change. You can see it well now? I hope.
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I really thank the presenters before me, including just before Charity. They showed how this tool works and how it's important to support the country or member states in the several processes. So my presentation, as was just said, is mostly on data. We work, I'm from the UNDP Global Policy Center for Governance. We coordinate UNDP's work on statistics. And our main goal is to support on the SDG 16. So support the member states on SDG 16. And this is a very, is a very broad ambition, and it's an ambition that requires a lot of work. It's not a UN ambition, it's the member state, it's the civil society, it's the private sector, it's all of us. What we saw recently, there are parts of statistics that were developed, like everyone, if I'd say an unemployment rate, that's very easily understandable what it is, but governance statistic wasn't. And the governance statistic, which is the base of what we call SDG 16, only became part of official statistics 2 years ago, when it passed in the Statistical Commission as a domain that also needs to be measured. So we had demographic and social, we all know more or less what it is, the economic, the environment, and governance became a domain. This was greatly pushed by the fact that we do have the SDG 16 as a goal. And what we see is that since the beginning of the agenda, we have now, this is for the full agenda, what you see on your left side, we only have 17% of the goals on track. It feels very, very low. We have around 18% moderate or moderate progress. But if you see the other side, the red side, we have a lot that is stagnated or regressing. And this is very worrying. If you see the other side, the right graph, and you go to SDG 16, which you see now, I don't know if you can see my cursor, we don't have any of the targets on track. So SDG 16 has 12 targets, 12 commitments that all of us as a member state we decided we would try to achieve. It is the goal that has peace, has justice, has inclusion, but despite this amazing work that we see being done all over, we continue far from our goal that was set for 2030. This is one side of what this statistics are saying, but there's another side of what the statistics are saying, is that for us to actually be able to measure more accurately our progress, we also have to take into account that for a lot of regions, we are not able to measure our progress. You see, for instance, only 50% of the countries at this point, this is the statistic from 1 week ago, only 50% of the countries have some data to measure their progress, which means that from a lot of us, we are still making this decision-making a little bit without having the full information. For some regions, it's very low. Oceania is 23%. We have SID with only 31%. On the other side, we have Central and Southern Asia, which is a little bit better, but still, we are greatly lacking. So that was the bad news. I prefer to start with the bad news. Now I'll go to the good news. The good news is that since we adopted the agenda and the fact that we have the agenda, this has greatly pushed the development of standards. Because one thing that we have to recognize is in 2015, when we decided on the agenda, a lot of things that we said it was priority, like eliminating conflict deaths, we did not know how to measure it. And it took all of this time, now we are in 2024, for us, one, to start measuring, second, to learn how to measure. There's a wonderful initiatives, for instance, from UNODC, they have the crime victimization survey. They have something that is called ICCS, with International Classification for Crime for Statistical Purposes, that help us harmonize what we call the several crimes in several different systems. So when we say that we have a 15% increase on homicide, we are actually measuring homicide the same way all over. UNDP has also, which is the agency I represent today, as work on defining what actually you're calling governance statistics. So defining the concept, so at least agree on that, creating some of the tools. We have also SHR that worked greatly on giving a human rights perspective. Why this is important is because sometimes we measure, but we don't take into account the human rights perspective. So the principle of collecting data and ensuring that we'll do no harm in that process is a vital principle. So there's a lot that has developed during this period. Because we still did not have a lot of standards, and because there was a great demand from the member states, from the several ministries, but the justice sector, the education side, there was a lot of requests. UNODC, OSHR, and UNDP, they went through the framework and decided to create one single solution that would help us collect data. So we focus more on the household survey side. So when we continue to focus, to have data and try to improve the administrative record side, which means that we should still continue to measure capacity. We should still know how many judges we have, or how many police officers, or how many hospitals, or chairs, or medical, or masks. We still need to this administrative record side, but we need to complement it with the human side of the statistics. So if we have only the administrative records, let's say we go with justice, because for instance, corruption here, we on the administrative record side, we have how many cases reach the system. This is crucial information. This is very important information, but it is incomplete information, because we also need to know how many people are actually experience corruption, because we know that not everything that's actually happening is going to enter the system. There will be cases that people will not file their complaint, will not have. We have cases, of course, that the system is super effective and it's able to detect or to account for most of the offenses. But we know that even in the best system, that does not happen. So we need as human side, in this case, to measure bribery, the experience of bribery, at the same time that we measure the other parts. You know, DC very recently launched what's called the statistical framework for measuring corruption, which went broader than just trying to measure bribery, but trying to measure corruption in a broader sense. It's still, it was approved last year, it's still in the initial phases, but it's a very, very important tool. They will provide new information. So going back to this survey side, the solution that was created by UNDP and UNODC OSHR. What you see in the front of you is the framework, the SEG framework, and all the indicators that we have on the SEG framework. What you have on the dark blue is all of the indicators that require a survey base. So we have, I already mentioned bribery, but also we have, for instance, satisfaction in public services, which is indicator 1662. So yes, we should measure the experience of corruption, but we also should measure how satisfied people.
Mariana, you managed to mute yourself.
That's amazing. I did not even touch. And I'm someone who talks with his hands, so I think all of you are seeing it.
You were talking about measuring experience, and then
it was such an important experience that I muted myself. Okay, so we need to measure the experience of bribery, but also the satisfaction with the service. These two, they will complement each other, because one might influence the other. Your experience of corruption with a certain institution might influence how you perceive that institution, your satisfaction with that institution, and even your availability to use. Some institutions we don't have a choice, like hospital we have to go, but the fact that you are satisfied or dissatisfied, for instance, with the education service, will have a very profound impact on how you use that service. So these are the parts, the several parts that are included. Another part on the survey, again, we remember we have the experience of corruption, is a discrimination. The different population groups will have different types of experience with corruption. The bribery for women is not the same as bribery for men. And the excellent statistics produced by UNODC show that they experience differently. The fact that you use certain vulnerable groups as well, although I've been told that don't call it vulnerable groups, but certain groups will have a different. So for us to try to have a more targeted approach, try to find solutions, we also need to measure the discrimination, the experience of discrimination together with the bribery. So we know actually who is being discriminated, who is the victim of the bribery, and we can connect the several information. So I hope I'm touching my screen. I hope I don't mute myself again. This is the SDG 16 survey. It's measuring discrimination. It's measuring political efficacy, satisfaction public service, access to justice, which is an extremely important component to measure when we're measuring corruption. We're actually measuring if the people, they experience the bribery, if they experience all other types of crime, but are they able to access the justice system to file their complaint or to start the court case? Both, and the survey measures this, both criminal side. So we measure, I think Chartus mentioned something on gender. The survey measures gender-based violence, so intimate partner violence. And if this reaches the access to justice, reaches the justice system, it also measures physical violence, psychological violence. On the other side, there's another indicator, which is 1633. It measures how the civil cases are reaching the justice system as well. So that's another very important part. So this is the tool, basically. I will not go through it. I don't know how I'm in time, but I'm a little bit concerned now. No, I think I have 15 minutes. That's okay. So this tool was developed with the member states to make it is not a UN solution for the countries, is a solution created with the countries for the specific needs. We went through a desk review, going all these different methodologies, an expert consultation where we went through the several national statistical offices, gave the instrument and showed them how does it work. If it works for them, does not work for them, do we need to adjust? We had a cognitive test with Cape Verde, El Salvador, and Kenya, because the way you understand certain questions will depend a little bit of cultural differences or context, several factors. So we went through all of this, and what we're doing now is we have developed the tools. There's 3 different types of solutions the countries can request. The photos that you see below are from Kazakhstan, from Kenya, and from Tunisia. And some countries will request a full implementation because they want to measure all the indicators. They want to know what's their status in terms of SDG 16. That's the first solution. Some countries, they already have a survey, and they're merging. So for instance, they have a victimization survey, which is a type of survey used to try to measure the experience of victimization. You have that, and you only want access to just sometimes they try just adjusting, but they already have this base. Another times they are integrating without being related. So you have a labor force survey, but you need a basic information on bribery. You need that indicator. So you can take one model, only the model on bribery, on corruption, and you integrate on that existing survey. And so far, the information that's being produced is mostly used to support the national decision making. We also, of course, is also used to reporting at the global level. We have cases. This is the Tunisian case where they use the data from the survey to have several discussions around the findings and trying to see where the country is lacking, for instance, they saw on the disputes, the most common dispute was land buying and selling property. They saw they have 7.7% of their population experience psychological violence. 72% of the population feel safe, but you see a difference between the males and females. So men, 83.9% feel safe, but only 60% of women felt safe. So they use all of this information to do what you see a small photo on your right side, which was where they discussed these findings and try to see at the community level what solutions or what can be done to reverse their situation or reverse the current trend. And at this moment, sorry, I see now that I have a problem. So why measure why measure SDG 16? We've never been as ready in terms of methodological tool as we are now. We are off track, and that's a reality. Will we achieve 2030? Will we achieve the goal? Probably not, but we still have the constraints that we need to solve. With the agenda or without the agenda, corruption continues to be a priority and continues to be something that we really need to invest. So we need to measure to at least for us to know if we are moving in the right direction or not, what should be done, how can we actually try in this agenda or on the next move forward. So, well, in the last slide, I think our colleagues might share the presentation. You see several tools. You see the first Global Progress Report on SDG 16 that was launched by UNDP and ODC-OCHR last year and gave a very comprehensive picture of how are we as a world in terms of peace, in terms of justice, in terms of inclusion. Next week, Wednesday, the second Global Progress Report will be launched, but it will have the same 3 agencies plus 6 other agencies that are contributing with their data, like the World Bank, IPU, WHO. So please stay tuned. It will be live streamed. And we've also included several tools and information. And if there's anything, any clarification that we need now or later, feel free to contact me, our UNODC colleagues, or our OCHR colleagues. We'll be very, very pleased to respond, to support, or to discuss any point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariana. And indeed, thank you all of the presentations today. I found them very, very interesting. And I do hope that this has been a learning session. I appreciate that we've only got 10 minutes left, and admittedly, we started a little bit late, but I would encourage everybody to please pop their questions in the chat. And it can be to any of our presenters. It can be to Daniela, Charity, or even our John Mugendi. I see they're all still online and with us, so please feel free. Unfortunately, because of the size of this group, we have not enabled the microphones for you, but you can raise your hand if you have a really burning question that you feel you don't have time to write in the chat. But so we are on standby. Maybe I ask the presenters if they have any questions for each other. You never know.
May I direct a question to Mariana?
Please.
Yes. Hi, Mariana. So we've worked together with Mariana, but the kind of very holistic survey that you're asking for, that you have said, is very expensive. If we also have to look at like if we're doing gender and corruption, we look at how many people have been able to report SGBV. We can go down the rabbit hole because there's so much that needs to be looked at. What are your thoughts? And also, Jennifer, maybe that's also something for you.
Okay. The thoughts on being an expensive survey? Or I'm sorry, I lost.
I think it's more about if we do like a full-fledged corruption survey, for instance, you know, doing these wide dedicated surveys, yes, they are quite costly.
They are.
You know, and I know that Kenya is gearing up to do one. Nigeria actually launched their corruption survey, the 3rd in a row, yesterday. Ghana has previously done one, and so on. And I think, you know, these are costly, but if you want to have the representative sample size, if you want to have the coverage of the whole country, it adds up. At the same time, we're doing something similar in Serbia, which of course is much smaller in terms of geographical territory and therefore much cheaper. So I think that's more the sort of, it's difficult to get the funding, but it's so important.
But still on the size, what we advise the countries in general is you have to find the solution that responds better to your needs at that moment. If what you need is a very comprehensive information, very, very comprehensive information that you can actually go and segregate, and that your stable data will be representative, it will be expensive. You can still see at that point what is possible. How much segregation do you can? It's not so how much do you want, because sometimes you want a lot of segregation, but you cannot afford it. So you have to go maybe only national level. Either you have to see what's the best solution at that moment. Some countries, they prefer to go just with the model, the bribery model. But again, the bribery model is to respond to very small part of the data need. So it's just for you to have a very fast information on this. And this is why this SDG 16 survey started to adjusting to be able to be included in other surveys. So in a larger survey, for instance, KNBS has the label for survey. They have I don't remember now if they have mix or not, but they have several household surveys, and you might just put one and go with that information while you resource mobilize for a more deeper analysis. I really cannot advise on the specific case of Kenya without knowing the information that you have at this point, because the time when we worked mostly on the administrative record side. But we'll be very, very, Charity will be very happy to connect with you, with UNDP, and under the leadership of UNODC, since they are the guardians of the corruption survey, and try to find a solution that will work for Kenya and will work for your office.
Thank you.
And national counterparts.
Thanks.
And by
Yes,
the way, I'm very
Marina.
happy to see you, Charity. I've not seen you since 2019.
Yeah, several years. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think also, Mariana, one of the things that you mentioned in your presentation, which is really, to keep in mind, is that you don't always have to do a full-fledged dedicated anti-corruption survey. Yes, there is a wealth of data that you can gather from something like that. You can also attach other types of modules when you are still doing a survey. But a lot of countries do these household surveys. As you mentioned, you can just attach one of the modules just to gather some data.
Yeah.
Because some data is better than no data, right?
It is frequent. It is. We have all the pressing need of information, but we have to find the solution that we can actually in some cases that we can apply. Before we just started this session, Jennifer and I had a discussion. We said, let's be very frank in this session. And the truth is, sometimes you ideally should always be, if you want a corruption, should be corruption survey. But that takes time to mobilize the funds. So while you're mobilizing the funds, maybe a model might be a solution, so you have some information.
Exactly. Something to go on. Are there any other questions? I see that Mariana, there's in the chat, somebody who wants to learn more about data on Windows. She's sent through, I believe it's a she, Kimberly, saying that she will contact you next week. So all good. If there's no other questions, I once again would like to thank all our speakers for their time and all our participants for the interest shown in this session. All of us here, of course, feel very strong about all these questions, and it's always heartwarming to see that so many others share this passion to try to stand up against corruption, for the rule of law, and so forth. Thank you so much, and I wish you all a very pleasant evening, day ahead, night ahead, wherever you are. From us to you, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.